all set, Cat? Awesome. Welcome to the Select Board meeting of February 26th. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I do want to let people know that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on Easton Cable Access Television. Thank you for being here tonight to record this again for us. And I will start with you, Jamie, and just go around and make introductions to ensure we have a quorum.
Jamie Stebbins.
I'm Jennifer Stacy.
I'm Dottie Fulgenetti.
I'm Craig Barger.
And Selectman Mark Lamb is not able to be here tonight. So we do have a quorum. And the first item on our agenda is 6 p.m. public hearing. Craig, if you want to read that notice.
Absolutely. The Select Board of Easton, as licensing authorities, will hold a public hearing in Frothingham Hall, 15 Barrel Street, Easton, Mass. On Monday, February 26, 2024 at 6 p.m. to consider and act upon the application of Tucker Custom Crafts LLC for an alteration of premises of an existing Section 12 general on-premises wine and malt beverage license for premises situated at 3 Roach Brothers Way, Unit B, Easton, Mass., with a plan on file at the Select Board's office.
So I thought that the guests sit at the end, but
No, this room.
is that true?
Yep.
Okay. I was just not sure where to put people. This is not usually where we have our meetings, so we're a little out of sorts tonight. If you want to come up to the table.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
So thanks for being here tonight. If you want to both introduce yourselves and just kind of give us a summary of why you're here. We understand that you've expanded and that impacts your license. So just give us a little bit of info on that.
Okay, I'm Lynn Tucker.
I'm Brian Tucker.
Thank you. So yes, we own Pinspiration in Roach Brothers Plaza in Easton. We are a DIY craft studio. We also have a Jackson Pollock inspired splatter room, which is extremely popular. We are currently expanding as we do feel that a lot of times people will come and we're at capacity. Our tables will fill. People come in to craft. We do accept reservations, but we also accept walk-ins. So we'd like some additional space so that when people come in, I don't have to turn them away at the door, especially when they've got little kids with them. Breaks my heart. And then also our splatter room is booked out for 2 months at a time. So we'd like to be able to have a second splatter room so that I can have birthday parties and offer regular splatter experience at the same time.
That's excellent. That's really great. How long have you had? Is it 2 years?
It'll be
2.5.
3 in
3.
August, yeah.
Wow, that goes by fast.
Yeah, very fast.
Well, congratulations. We love to hear that businesses are expanding and bringing in new clients, and it shows a real value to our town and to the area. I'm sure you get people in the region besides Easton. So
Yeah, we
Oh,
do. We get
absolutely.
people from north of Boston, Rhode Island,
Maine.
Western Massachusetts.
New
They
Hampshire.
drive quite a while to come, so we
That's
always
great.
ask everyone where they're from, so it's nice to know that, you know, they take the trip, so.
Well, what a success story.
Yes.
You know, I'm sure it was a little stressful to start a new business. I
Yes.
remember when you came in for the original license with, you know, the concept of how that would be. So I'm glad to see it so successful. So you're looking to expand your on-premises wine and malt beverage license?
Yes.
And let me see. We have sent it through to contingent to approvals with town departments and the settlement of fees. Any comments or questions, Jamie, Jen?
I would just thank you. Thanks for being here tonight and for your business with the town.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
I echo what Jamie said. I've been to several parties for, my daughter's been to several parties there, and I've been attended with her, and it's a wonderful place. So if anybody hasn't been there, I do highly recommend it. The splatter room is really, it's awesome. And you get to watch the kids doing their Jackson Pollock thing, and it's fun,
Oh,
so.
Great.
I was gonna ask what the
adults, too.
splatter room was.
Yeah,
so that's
oh,
what that is.
I did it
Okay.
myself, so.
We do a date night splatter, so you'll have
Okay.
to come in.
Trying to make the plan to do that.
That would be like a good team building thing for the select board, don't you think?
It's fun. It was, I haven't done that part myself, but watching it is a blast, so I'm in.
We do a lot.
We
of
do
team
a lot
building.
of team building, a lot of companies. Home Depot was just in a couple of weeks ago.
VCA veterinarians.
Veterinary,
We've had
we do a
many
lot
of
with
them.
the ARC too.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so,
Excellent.
yeah, we've had assisted living groups in our splatter room. We get really creative covering up wheelchairs and walkers, but oh my gosh, they have a great time,
That's terrific.
so.
That's great.
Any comments, Craig?
No, I'm just excited about your expansion too, and your success.
All right, well, with that, Craig, I would take a motion to extend the on-premises wine and malt beverage license contingent on the approvals from town departments and settlements of fees.
So moved. Barger.
Can I get a second?
Second?
Bodger, Stacy, and all in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Congratulations, and keep us posted on the great work you're doing.
Thank you, we
Thank
will.
you.
You have to come visit us.
Yes, yes. All right, next we have a new common victualler license, and this is for Honeydew Operations. Is that you? Come on up.
Oh, yeah, please, thank you.
How you doing?
Good, welcome.
Thank you.
So you're Don Levitt?
Yes, I am.
All right, thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you for having
And
me.
just tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Sure. I work for Honeydew Associates. I started with them in 1973, so I've been with them my whole career. Director of Quality Construction. And we have our locations are franchised. We have a location here in Eastern Mass on Belmont Street. And the franchisee has left. Honeydew Corporate is taking it over. We are going to clean it up, probably remodel it, and then we're going to sell the location back to a new franchisee.
Oh, that's terrific.
So in the meantime, we're just going to take it over.
Okay, excellent. Any questions? All right, well, with that, Craig, if you would like to, let me see where I am here. Make a motion to award the new common victualler license to, from Honeydew Operations Incorporated, doing business as Honeydew Donuts.
So moved. Barger.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous.
That was easy.
Excellent.
I like it. Thank you very much. Hope you have a nice night.
Good luck,
Thank you.
That was
good
an
luck
awesome
with the
story, too,
renovations.
just listening to them. That was a nice story, just listening to them.
Yeah.
You know what that business did. It was good.
Well, thank you for staying in Easton, and we appreciate your business as well.
Thank you.
All right, next we have an annual vehicle for hire license renewal. Do we have anyone here for that? We have an application for the renewal of a vehicle for hire license for Makram Armos, doing business as McLaurin LLC. And the information is in the packet, and the recommendation is for a renewals request subject to review by the applicable town departments. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? That's pretty standard.
Yep.
All right, Craig, you wanna make a motion?
Sure, I move to approve the annual vehicle for hire license renewal for Mark Lauren LLC, 5 Meadow Hill Court, number 43.
Second.
Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay. Next, we have some one-day liquor licenses. The first one is the Women's Ice Hockey Banquet for Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, April 6, 2024, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. with a rain date of April 7th, 2024. Stonehill College is requesting a one-day all-alcohol license for their Women's Ice Hockey Banquet to be held in Donahue Hall. An Easton Police detail is not required. Any comments or questions? Okay, can I get a motion, Craig?
So I move to approve the Women's Ice Hockey Banquet, Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, April 6, 2024, from 11 to 3 p.m. with a rain date of April 7th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous. That was Bodger and Stacy, sorry. Next, we have a student-athlete reception at Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, May 1st, 2024, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. with a rain date of May 2nd, 2024. Stonehill College is requesting a one-day beer and wine license for their senior student-athlete reception. As noted, an Easton Police detail is not required. Any comments or questions? All right, Craig?
I'll move to approve a senior student-athlete reception, Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, May 1, 2024, from 5 to 9 p.m. with a rain date of May 2nd to be held at Donahue Hall.
Second.
That's Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. Next, True North Running Clubs, Running Companies, Narragansett Summer Running Festival, Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, July 14th, 2024, 8:15 a.m. to 12 p.m. with a rain date of July 21st, 2024. Jason Paganelli from True North Running Company is requesting a one-day beer and wine license for this Narragansett Summer Running Festival. And an Easton Police detail is not required for this event either. Any comments or questions?
It's a great event, done it before, so glad to see it coming back again.
Great.
Approve a True North Running Company's Narragansett Summer Running Festival, Stonehill College, 320 Washington Street, July 14th, 2024, from 8:15 a.m. to 12 p.m. with a rain date of July 21st, 2024.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. Terrific. Okay, so the next item that we have is review and vote for a letter of support to the Planning and Zoning Board's proposal to comply with the MBTA community zoning law. So we have a letter in the packet that I'm just gonna try to get to, hang on one second. And this was compiled based on some important questions that we have in the beginning. I'm not gonna read the letter verbatim, but I do wanna call out some pieces of it so that people at home can do it, and I hope we could put this on social media so that people can take a look at it, because this is probably the most comprehensive summary, and it's long, so a long summary, but a lot of detail in here with just some of the high points. Some of the questions that this addresses is, can my own children afford to live here when they grow up? Can my parents afford to stay here as they age? If my life circumstances changed, a career change, birth, death, divorce, are there homes here for me, or would I be forced to leave Easton altogether? Can we attract and retain businesses if their employees can't find a place to live near where they work? So everyone knows, if you're listening to the news or talking to your neighbors, that, you know, there's a challenge finding housing, the proper housing that's affordable to people in the community. And, you know, we've all been trying to tackle that. I think Easton has been doing a really great job over these years with bringing in housing that is diverse. And when I say that, I mean different kinds of housing. Single-family homes, condos, multifamily homes and apartments, so that there's something for everybody. We're still really short, in my opinion, of homes to downsize to. There's not a lot of smaller homes for people to move into, or first-time home for new buyers. I think that we've done a good job balancing where we put the housing, because it's been thoughtfully planned out. And that's something that our community has been very proactive in doing. We have a housing production plan, we have a master plan, we've had charrettes and focus groups and neighborhood meetings all over the years that I've been on the board. They point to certain sections in town where we want the housing to drive economic development, and they talk about the balance and the impact on how that's gonna have in the community. So with the housing that we've done to date, some of the big housing, Avalon, Queeset, it does blend into the community. It feels like it's already been here. It hasn't upset anything. The sky hasn't fallen. It's enriched our community by bringing in new community members that are volunteers and participants in the community. They live and work here or in nearby places. And so that's just kind of like the preface of it. This letter talks about the documented demand that we have. We do have that, and it's in all of those documents. The need for that housing, those documents were all created and put together by people in this community that live here, that had a say in all these processes. So year after year, when we do these and we update them, it's the community that's giving the feedback that they want the housing. It's the businesses that are saying that they want the housing. It seems that there's always some misunderstanding when we have these. I think there's been like 25 meetings that the planning board has done. We're meeting people where they are. We're reaching out to people in the community, whether it's a neighborhood meeting or a board or a committee or a group that has an interest, and answering emails. We've done everything we can possibly. Well, when I say we, I mean the planning board, but the select board also has been doing outreach so that people can hear this. Tomorrow night is going to be the last night that they're going to be presenting this, the planning board. They will be here tomorrow night. I'd encourage people who haven't heard it in full to come here and make your decisions. We'll be voting on this at town meeting, but make your decisions based on factual information. I've seen a lot of stuff on social media that's completely inaccurate, and it's getting people, upset that we're going to be building over 1,000 new homes. That's not what this is about. This is changing the zoning so that we can be proactive on where we want the housing to go. There's a lot behind that. Some of the places that this has been spoken about is the master plan of 2014, the Massachusetts Future of Work Report, commissioned by former Governor Baker in 2021, Easton's AARP Age-Friendly Communities Report, Easton's Affordable Housing Trust. I sit on the Commission on Disabilities. It's something that they were talking about supporting because there's not enough opportunities for people with different abilities and mobilities in our town. Let me just kind of go through and see some of these. The cost of inaction. What happens if we don't adopt this zoning? The state, this is a mandate. It's not a suggestion. It's not a request. It's a law that we have to abide by. So if we want to break the law, the things that will happen with that is the Attorney General's office has already made a commitment that they will take action on communities that don't follow this. And we will also not be eligible for any of the grants that we've enjoyed in the past. So some of the grants that we've gotten, I'm just going to read through really quickly. MassWorks is a big infrastructure grant. These are grants that get us sewer improvements, sidewalks, crosswalk improvements. It's the grant that transformed downtown Northeastern, where the Farmer's Daughter and all those restaurants are. Many people will remember back 10 years ago, that place was barren. There was really nothing in the downtown. We got a $1 million award in 2011 to get that started. In 2013, we got $400,000 to do crosswalk improvements between Belmont and Washington Street. In 2017, we got $1.5 million to do the Northeastern Village and throughout Easton with roadways, sidewalks, crosswalks, wayfinding, the great signs that we just, everybody was talking about. Housing Choice in 2018, we got $225,000 for the Five Corners Sewer District for sewer design. In 2019, we got $1.5 million from MassWorks for the Five Corners Sewer District for the sewer installation. The Housing Choice of 2021, we got $225,000 for roadway improvements design and the future tip project for Foundry Street. In 2022, we got $400,000 for complete streets for the sidewalks going up Lincoln Street. In 2022, we also got $30,000 for a study for a water and sewer capacity study for connecting to Brockton for $30,000. MassWorks $250,000 in 2022 for Foundry Street for the roadway improvement. Mass Preservation Projects Funds for 2022 $59,000 for column restoration as part of a CPA-funded restoration, and the MVP Action Grant in 2023, $100,000 for wetland restoration to increase Mulberry Brook floodplain storage. So just with those big numbers, I think you can kind of hear Easton's really benefited greatly from these grants, and these are things without these grants we would not have right now. So again, the housing, is driving the interest in the economic development and the infrastructure improvements throughout the town. It's all connected. I think that this is something that we've already pretty much been headed in the direction of picking the areas in town where we want the housing. We've been planning for the infrastructure on it. It's not a big lift for us to do that. And when people say, if one of the areas is around Avalon and you pick parcels around where you already want to see the dense housing, nobody's going to knock Avalon down and build a skyscraper there. It just means that that's included as part of the amount of housing that you need in that zone, and you can infill the rest of it to be able to meet those metrics. The other areas up by Roach Brothers, that doesn't mean somebody's going to build housing on top of Roach Brothers. It just means that it's zoned so if it redevelops someday, that would be an opportunity where you could put housing. It doesn't mean it's going to happen now. It just means that that's the area. A lot of these towns are going to redevelop over and over and over again. They always do. So the other zone is down by Belmont Street in Brockton. There's already some housing there, and you want the housing to be close to transportation and amenities, stores, and so forth. And that's an area that that people in that area have said that they would like to see that further developed. So. For more details, there's a very comprehensive page on the town's website. And every meeting has been saved and broadcast on ECAT. You can look it up there as well. So I just wanted to hear what the board wanted to say, what you thought about the letter, and what kind of comments you had.
So I'll start. Number one, I appreciate, Dottie, that you started off with the misinformation that's out there, because we're going to continue, and I hope to be there tomorrow night too, as we all just continue to refine and be sure we're able to provide the correct information. And that's the only way to combat misinformation, is to be there armed with what we put together here. This is wonderful. It's a quick, digestible, read to really understand what our goals are. I myself already think about my own home, and we having an opportunity to move into like a Shoveltown apartment down the road. And you're right, even with the wait list now, it's not possible. We don't have the luxury of doing that and staying in Easton when our kids graduate out. So in 10 years, we'll be empty nesters, and there won't necessarily be an option for us. And our house will be too much to maintain without a family. In fact, I'm hoping our kids just stay and live there and become my landscapers. So they don't know it yet. But so thank you. It's extremely important, and we do talk demographically. This isn't going to change around the country. There's a massive shortage of housing, affordable housing, meaning this town wouldn't be affordable to me today. I couldn't move in here and be a first-time homeowner, and it was a stretch community for me in 2009. And had we not gone through the financial crisis that we did in 08 and 09, and my house sat for a number of years, we still wouldn't have been in Easton. So, further along in our careers, and Easton's now, we're here helping to volunteer and be part of the community, but it's not one that was obtainable for a young family. And so, thanks. This is a great document.
Excellent.
That really resonates, because we tried to move to Easton twice, and it was just like, as a young family, but the first time was before kids. Second time was once, things were more motion. And it was like the choice of being house poor. We would have had nothing, and we would have been set up for a failure or make a pivot. So it took us a long time to get here. I'm so happy to be here. And I want that opportunity for other people. And I think you said it perfectly well. Like, my children, I fear they'll never have an opportunity to be in this community. They love, like, my daughter's like, I'm gonna buy the house next door someday, Mom. I'm like, you probably won't, but I want for her to have that ability to, or at least to be somewhere near us if she wants to be. And, for family to stay nearby as they age and go through different changes of patterns in their life. And that's something that people, is becoming less and less of an option. So this is why this is important. I really think it's important the community comes out, listens, learns, and understands that if we, as a community, make a decision that's short-sighted because of misconceptions, we're going to have long-term repercussions that will have big impacts for us. And that's difficult. Also, the letter's great, and I'm thinking back to when this process started. We started first hearing about how complicated it was, how overwhelming it was, the misconceptions we all even had, because we were like, wait, this is big and scary, and lots of complicated legal language. And the communication on this has distilled it down to a really easy to understand format. It's still complicated. I'm not gonna make it sound like it's suddenly easy.
Right.
But folks need to read the letter and understand the context, the broader context, and then just spend the time coming to the meeting, because we've come so far in our understanding of this and what it means. So anything that anybody thought a year or two ago, like, put it away and just come with an open mind.
Great, thank you. Greg?
Several things. One, I wanted to thank the planning board and Stephanie Danielson for the work they've done in the 25 or more public meetings to try to help people in this town understand what this is all about. Number two is that when we talk about cost of housing, we moved to the house in 1980, and when I look at the valuation of my house now, I never could have bought today. And thirdly, I just wanted to read something from the report, if that's okay, about the housing crisis, because our own public service demonstrate the impact of the regional housing crisis on our residents. Deputy Director of Health and Community Services for Financial Assistance and Veteran Services, Tracy Levine, who oversees the town's effort to coordinate, develop, and implement social and supportive services for our residents and veterans, has shared the following sobering data with us. Since March 2022, of all residents who have sought Deputy Director Levine's services, 42% were seeking support for housing, which typically revolved around affordability. Of these residents seeking housing support, 69% were over the age of 60 years of age, 14% met the standard to be classified as homeless, 77% were priced out of their homes due to rent increases and secured other affordable housing in Easton, 21% were priced out of their homes due to rent increases and secured housing in more affordable towns, having to leave their home in Easton. 33% were on fixed budgets, anticipated rent increases, and made the decision to apply for affordable subsidized housing. And 23% are continuing to struggle to make rent payments and seek financial relief in other areas, such as applying for SNAP and fuel assistance. I think that says it all, as far as I'm concerned, about the need for this, for housing. Thank you, Dottie.
I think that's an excellent point. One of the things that, across the state, Massachusetts is really losing ground on being the leader in a lot of different things, but technology specifically, the health industry, because people come from all over the world to go to our schools, and then they graduate from college and they leave and take all that great intelligence with them somewhere else where they can afford to live. In my own family, you guys probably have all heard this a million times, but my son is in the Navy. He's a nuclear mechanic for the Navy, smart guy. He's living down in Virginia. He's not coming back because he can't, the value of what he has down there to be able to buy a house is he couldn't buy a house up here. So, who's gonna take care of us when we're old? My daughter, her plan is to wait us out until we die and she tries to fight him for the house, I guess, That's not a really good strategy, and I say that being sarcastic, but it's really true. A lot of that next generation, they're not gonna be able to afford to buy homes, they're gonna be really just renting, and that's the way that you create generational wealth is through housing. And so a lot of people are gonna really miss out on that if they're not able to buy housing here, or even renting it until they decide where they want to be. So I appreciate you calling out that data, Craig. You're right, it does really pretty much say it all. Connor, did you want to add to this, or?
Sure, if I may. I think it's important, and I think almost everyone on the board has, to recognize that this can feel like a lot of change on the heels of a lot of change. And that I don't think this letter or the board's public positions on any of this in any way are meant to, shame anyone into thinking that they shouldn't have concerns about development or planning or anything like that. It's perfectly legitimate for folks to want to understand what changes could mean in their community, and there's always a particular sensitivity around these things when they're attached to a state law or a state mandate, right? Like if you think about 40B. And Easton has been really successful working with these state zoning laws for many, many years, and I think it's really important. We will make sure that this letter, after the board transmits it to the planning board, if that's what you wish to do, is available publicly, because a lot of these things, when you are only looking, if you're driving down the street, you see construction, and that's kind of your frame of reference, it does feel like there's this kind of constant focus on that, but I think it's really important to highlight that for 10, 15 years or so in Easton, it hasn't been a mutually exclusive approach of develop at all costs and set aside longstanding values of historic preservation, open space preservation, things that have made Easton a really desirable place. Some of the largest open space acquisitions this town has done in its history have been concurrent with a large increase in our housing stock, concurrent with a large increase in our multifamily housing. And 10 years ago, when this was a future-facing conversation about 40B, it was very common, I think, in this room, many of the same people here, that you would hear folks who weren't necessarily concerned or opposed to the idea of any one particular development, but they were worried about its potential economic impacts, about its potential impacts on municipal services and finances. And I think it's really important now that we have gone through this experience together, we have the benefit of, you know, the quantitative data and the time having done this, that I think is always instructive to look at when we're making these, what are ultimately value decisions. You know, Easton is going on 20 years now without an operating override, which is really incredible for a minimum aid community that gets the minimum amount of money from the state allowed by law every year for education. Up until 10 years ago, and in large part thanks to working with housing, multifamily housing developments, had no sewer infrastructure to speak of, and so had a very, very, very constrained commercial tax base. For a community to be a desirable place to live and continue to provide good services with no override for that long would not have happened without leaning into and working collaboratively with voters, with abutters, with the community, and with developers. A lot of the largest taxpayers in Easton are multifamily developments. The population in town has grown far slower than the growth of housing units because not just in Easton, but around the United States, we have an aging population, we have a shrinking family size as folks, you know, under 40 have fewer and fewer children, in large part due to the unaffordability of raising a family in the United States right now, particularly in the Northeast. So you need more units of housing to accommodate basically the same number of folks. People are living longer, they're either divorced or they're empty nesters, and as you touched on, Dottie, there's not necessarily places for people to go once their family dynamic shifts and their kids grow up and move out. And we were at a Chamber of Commerce event, and the Secretary of Housing and made a really great point that Massachusetts is an incredible state, right? That's why there's such high demand that we're failing to meet as a Commonwealth when it comes to people wanting to come live here. We have the best public schools in the United States, some of the strongest public schools in the world, if you made Massachusetts its own little country. We have great universities, we have a lot of amazing things happening here. And education represents the largest, say it's true in Easton, it's true in almost every city in town, it's true for a huge part of the state budget. Public education is one of the single, I don't want to say costly because that sounds negative, it is where we invest the most of our public resources.
Yep.
And that's true grades kindergarten through college. And then those young adults that we have spent hundreds of thousands or millions of public dollars to educate have to leave. And that's just really bad policy. And we are all collectively too smart to have such dumb policy. But that's what the dynamic is right now. Very few states invest in education like we do. And there are a few, but Massachusetts is up there with states that do make it quite difficult outside of cities for anything outside of detached single-family homes to be constructed. And single-family homes are great; they fit a lot of needs. But you know, you think about a few hundred units of multifamily that have been constructed in Easton in the past 10 years, and that's a lot comparatively to what Easton had done before that. But it's really important to remember that even with that, about 4 out of 5 of every units of housing in this town are still single-family units. So while there has been a shift in a 10-year window where there were more multifamilies being built than single-family units, the overwhelming majority of housing stock here is still single-family. And if the zoning that the planning board is proposing is adopted, and even if all of those units were built overnight, which is not how that works, it's a zoning mandate, not a building mandate, Easton would still be overwhelmingly single-family housing. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Again, single-family homes are great, they contribute a lot of property value, but there's a lot of kind of misinformation about the idea that somehow multifamily units don't, right? And we've seen that, we talked about this with the building project, that the value of Easton's existing single-family housing stock has grown faster than in all of our surrounding communities. So clearly, the town working with developers, working with the public, doing these 40Bs has not damaged the value of property here. There's been no change in crime rates. There's been a strengthening of our financial reserves as a community. So I really would encourage people to read the actual data on this. because we can appreciate there's been a lot of change, but it's been a lot of progress without sacrificing, historic preservation, open space preservation. So I appreciate the board considering the letter.
Dottie, can I just mention one other thing that, on heels of what Connor's saying, is that, so the value that you see too with multifamily housing is there's been a real shift away from the dependence on vehicles and being able to be within a walkable distance to facilities and shopping, and you see that in a lot of places where now COVID threw some of that off, where more and more people were moving to city centers for that luxury, to be able to live and work and be able to dine and shop and all that. And again, as I think about retirement, that's appealing, right? When you have a community like we have that has continued to reinvest and to bring in new businesses, wonderful new restaurants, wonderful shopping, and new entrepreneurs that are starting these new companies that people want to go frequent and take advantage of, there's more benefits to having more dense housing and having the opportunity to walk to those places. And the town becoming more friendly for pedestrians, more friendly for cyclists, as we've done. Along with sewers, we've brought in a lot of sidewalks and connected north and south essentially now, and it's about to even be more connected here soon. So thanks for bringing that up too. I think there's a lot of value brought to our community.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to ask if we could take a vote to send this letter of support from us to the planning board, and we can get that over to them electronically. If somebody wanted to make a motion?
I move that we sign and send this letter, this very well-written document to the planning board.
Second.
So that's Barger and Stacy. All in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, next we have a discussion and vote to approve the issuance and other details of the general obligation bonds in the amount of $16,420,000 dated March 6, 2024, and the bond anticipation note of $11,998,100 dated March 7, 2024, and to sign the related closing documents. Welcome.
Good evening. Okay. There should be a memo in your packet that outlines the specific purposes for this borrowing. This is our annual borrowing. In the memo, I try to think each time what would be the most constructive thing to offer in a brief form. But you can see that between the bond and the ban this year, you can sort of see some of the complexity as we get into some of the bigger projects that we have. Each time I appear here for the annual borrowing, I do explain that when you bond money, when the town sells bonds, there are laws that require you to use that money within a certain amount of time. So when you're financing a long-term project, you have to be careful how you finance it, because you don't want to just borrow everything all at once up front. And that's where the bans come in. So there's continually a rolling sort of system of the bans that turn into bonds eventually when we have achieved enough of the project that we needed to have done. In some cases, such as this time through, some of the bans are being rolled over. And you can see that in as part of the bond. I'm sorry, the bans are being rolled into bonds, and then additional money is also being banned for the same purpose. So this is the beginning of some of the larger projects that we have going on, including the new public safety building project. I don't know that I need to itemize everything, but there's some capital items from fiscal year '23, and then some of the other larger projects ongoing: the PFAS treatment facilities, the water treatment plant, water main replacements, as well as some more money for the early elementary school project, and the school playgrounds that were just approved at the last town meeting, or at the last annual town meeting. We sold the bonds on February 14th. There was a lot of, we had 13 bidders on the bond, which is considerable. Last year, we had 7 bidders. And the increased competition, I think, is reflected a little bit in the rate that we received, which is a net interest cost of 3.2% to 1% on the bond. That was down from the last year's sale, which was 3.63. The ban had 5 bidders. Again, that's a good showing for a ban. And the interest rate, again, was lower than the last time. This interest rate had an average interest cost of 3.4%. Last time it was 3.8%. So, so overall, just a really good showing for the bonds and the ban. Pretty happy with that. So, that's about it.
All right, any questions?
Just one about the ban. We only pay interest on the ban until it's rolled into the bond, and then we start paying the principal?
No,
Is
we
that-
pay interest on the ban.
Ban, and then it rolls into the bond?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, yep.
I just want to add also that the reason we're doing a mix as well is because, you know, once you issue bonds, you got to start paying principal back too.
Yeah.
So as not to overload the debt budget, we did a mix of bonds and bans. And there's a ban in there also for the school project, and that's mainly because at this point, we have not finalized the MSBA closeout on that project, even though it's substantially complete. Once that's done, we'll get the final reimbursement for state aid because they withhold 5%. And once we get that, we'll know exactly what the number is, and we will permanently finance the number then, the amount then.
That's really smart.
If I could just add, I think it's worth pointing out here, if you look at the police, fire, public works facilities replacement, we're bonding 4.7 million right now. Since voter approval of that project in October and November, quite a bit has changed, at least in the expectations in the market. And so that has informed so far for us to shift slightly the planning with borrowing. Before the debt exclusion election, there was still, I don't want to say zero because that's declarative, but there was very little talk of, you know, when rates would be cut, if it would be in 24, if it was higher for longer. We still obviously haven't seen any rate cuts, but there's a certain amount of expectations for that baked into the market right now, which I think you see reflected in the net interest costs here, which are quite favorable, which are an improvement from last year. But when we were building the debt model for that project that informed the tax impact analysis, we were carrying 4.25% for this March and 4.5% moving forward. So if things actualize how people are hoping, then we should be in a pretty advantageous spot as far as the interest rates we're paying, which directly translates to what it costs taxpayers, which is great. We're also borrowing less principal right now than we had anticipated because if you, as you notice, bans are currently more expensive from an interest perspective than bonds. So we are permanently financing what we anticipate we will be spending through the remainder of this design development phase through November. We're going to revisit either a ban or a bond for some other portion of funding for the project in the fall based on where the market's at. But so far, this is putting less on the exempt levy out of the gate than what we had forecast.
Excellent. Jamie, Jen, any questions?
No questions.
No questions from me either.
Well, I appreciate the thoughtful explanation that you give us every year. It's a good reminder. It's very high level to me, so I trust you've always done great great work. You keep our bond rating high, and knowing how to time these, and you know, nobody knows what the market does, and you've always made good decisions to help us get to where we need to be. So I appreciate that. So Craig, do you want to make the motion?
I move to adopt the votes prepared by the bond council in connection with the town's offering for the $16,420,000 general obligation bonds dated March 6, 2024, and the $11,988,100 bond anticipation note dated March 7, 2024, and incorporate the text of the vote of the select board into the minutes of this meeting.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. And did you want to talk about the bond rating, Moody's?
So Moody's, well, just to say that Moody's affirmed our AA3 rating, which is good, and in their,
And then there's one.
and the MIG one, which is just Moody's grade investment on the bands. And, in the credit opinion, which is on the website, they mentioned a few things. Factors that could lead to an upgrade would be material reserve and liquidity growth, lower leverage, and sustained economic growth. And factors that could lead to a downgrade, deteriorations of reserves and liquidity, or significant increase in leverage, borrowing exceeding our current capital plans, or contraction of the local economy.
I
But they've
think those are
affirmed our
very
rating.
important things for people to know about. Absolutely.
I think it's also worth noting, wow, and this came up, I believe, at the last meeting when we were looking at the community expenditure comparison report and reserves in particular, that we've made a lot of progress here. More than tripled our reserve standing the past 7 years or so. We are still at a lower reserve level than is typical of AA communities, which Moody's always identifies for us as a reminder to continue to really be judicious with building the reserve accounts and also thoughtful with any use of those reserves. But this is a good reaffirmation and is part of the good rates.
Well, one of the things that I didn't know when I first started was why would the town be borrowing all this money, and how does that impact, Moody's rating? And they want to see that the town is investing, and they look for a certain percentage of the budget that you are reinvesting in the community, so that they can see things are working out that well. Also, when we did a fiscal policy of how we were going to treat free cash and stabilization funds, and we've stuck to that over all these years, and that's really helped maximize where we are, in a pretty good position right now. At any point that you lose for your credit rating makes millions and millions of dollars in interest over the course of these. So it's why it's so really important. I think every board that I've been on since I've been on the board has really talked about the credit rating and how important that is to the select board, that we at least maintain and strive to always improve that and really know what the blind spots are. So we have experts here that know that, but sharing that with us and the public, I think, is really important. So I appreciate your efforts on that as well.
Thank you.
So, all right. Well, thank you for being here
Thank you.
tonight.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Next, we have the DPW Water Division update, lead service line inventory for the United States Environmental Protection Agency. It says in here, and they will tell us, there are no lead pipes in any of Easton's public water main infrastructures, but it's a survey for the US EPA to identify if any private water services have lead in them. So, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening.
So, so another new component of regulatory stuff rolling down in our industry. So, we're hopeful to quickly get a process to inventory and demonstrate that we don't have certain types of metallic pipes in our system. Any historical water system has pipes that are made from different material. And as you folks are aware, Flint, Michigan and Jackson, Mississippi are the reason why we're talking about this. And so we're part of this program that we need to get in place before the 16th of October, and to show that we don't have certain types of lead services, or that we identified galvanized service lines. So the other, galvanized is a problem because when it was manufactured, they used zinc, and as zinc is corroded, the galvanized steel is made with cadmium and lead, and as that breaks down, it then leaches out the lead. So two components that we need to kind of identify in our system, and so we've teamed up with Capital Strategic Solutions to help channel customers when we send out the letters, so that we can help customers with inventorying their own water service for us. But we understand that there's going to be times when we need to send our own field staff in to identify the lines for them. So that's a huge effort for us, and that's what we're trying to make you folks aware, that this is an initiative that we need to kind of get out quickly and start ramping up our efforts to get our inventory going.
Yeah, and as Rich said, we're required to do this by EPA. Where we don't have a record of a service line material, we have to actually do this survey. And we're gonna send out letters to about 5,000 properties, asking them to fill out the survey. So they'll get a letter in the mail. It will show all the steps. It'll have a QR code. So people that feel comfortable can actually take the survey, fill out the online application, take a photo of the service and submit it. You don't have to download any apps. It's a web-based survey. If someone does not feel comfortable, they don't know what we're talking about, there's a hotline they can call, get information. We can walk them through what the process is. And if they still don't feel comfortable with that, they can schedule an appointment for the water division to come out, inspect their service line. We have records on about 1,000, a little over 1,000 services that right off the bat, we know because we have records. It's been done recently. So those we know about, we're good. They won't be getting letters. Everyone else that gets a letter, just we don't have a physical record in our files that says this service is copper, this service is plastic. So we need to send that out. So it's basically, everything since the early 80s or earlier. We'll get a letter, and it's a huge undertaking. We're gonna get a lot of calls. What are the batches we're gonna do, Rich?
We figured somewhere around 700 over 8 weeks.
Yeah. So that's
700 letters a week.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's gonna generate a lot of calls, a lot of action needed. We are partnering with Capital Strategic Solutions to man a hotline, which will help to take some of that burden off of our staff. But again, we'll still have a lot of things to do and a lot of people to visit and a lot of questions to answer. So this is the first step, and we wanted to make everyone aware.
Does the EPA give any money
I was
to
just
you
gonna
for
ask
this?
that.
As you know from many of our mandates, no.
No.
Right.
Unfunded mandate.
And so I think that's really important to highlight that, the water division, I think if you count all staff, including technical staff and leadership, is 11 or 12 FTE approximately.
Correct.
1 full-time admin, and so 5,000 notices will go out, even if 10% of those folks, and it will probably be more than that, I assume, say, I'm not comfortable doing an inventory of the type of metal on my own property. That means 500 site visits, and you need to comply by October, right?
So,
Right.
Rich, if you find a home that has, the water line needs to be changed, how does that happen and who does that?
So we will encourage the homeowner to do that on their own volition. Once again, the EPA has no direct funding. They tell us that we can go into the SRF, but where we don't know the number of properties, I'd like to tell you it's less than 1%. But I don't know that for a fact, so I can't go out over that line to say that to you. So that's why we need to engage this process.
But I would think if you're a homeowner and you have, I know that we did over all the pipes in our house, it was
Right.
built in the 1800s, so we have all PVC in there now. You'd want to know that if you had pipes that were going to make your family not healthy. So I think it really is important to do that so that you know what you have to do to fix it.
Yeah, and there are steps that can be taken. So if you do identify a house that has a lead or galvanized service, there's steps that can be taken. They're encouraged to run the water for 30 seconds before they, drain, things like that, to get that flush out, because it really only leaches out when the water's stagnant. So you flush the water, and then, lead levels will be very, very, be non-detectable at that point. So there are things that can be done in the interim, but ultimately, if it's on private property, it is the resident's responsibility to replace that service. There may be funding in the future for those type of actions, but that's all to be determined. And we really don't know, what the level, the amount of homes that we might have impacted here yet. we don't anticipate a lot.
So we've had some big water infrastructure projects. When you did Foundry Street, you put in new water pipes down through all of that part of Southeastern. How do you determine when you do that? Is it that anytime there's construction? I know you take advantage of it if the street's gonna be already open to try to do it, but tell us.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So, for many years, there wasn't a lot of reconstruction of our system. It was basically all new as it went in, as subdivisions were built. We're at the point now where we're funding about $1.5 million a year to keep our system updated. We'll probably have to up that number a little bit because we don't want our pipes to be too old. So we have pipes that date back to 1887. The majority of our pipes are in that probably 50 to 60 year range. And normal service life is 50 to 75 years. So we want to make sure we update and replace our water mains as needed. What we're looking at now is get some of those older pipes out of the system and ones that we have frequent breaks on. So we track our breaks, our water main breaks. A lot of them tend to be not the oldest pipes, but pipes that are more problematic. We'll see like 1950s and 60s pipes are starting to break more than other pipes. So we'll target certain neighborhoods. So we have a list of neighborhoods and areas we want to address. Unfortunately, we just don't have funding to do them all at the same time, but we're working on that. So we just replaced this last year a water main on Foundry Street between Old Foundry and Norton Ave, a little bit of Norton Ave in there, because we had high breaks on that line. We'll be doing the same thing for Prospect Street in several years. But when we do a project, we do replace the service line to the curb stop. So that's basically the public right of way. The lines that we're concerned about are those private lines that go from the curb stop into the home. So in those, if we found one that had lead on it when we did the curb stop, we would alert the homeowner. And that probably has been happening for the last 30 years. It's just that we don't have records of that gap between the last 30 years. Earlier, what actually happened. Just wasn't documented. So that's why we need to do the survey to identify any of those pipes that remain.
So I guess part of what I would say, if anybody is watching this, is to give a plea for, please fill out the survey and respond to it. I know that it's still a challenge. Water meters need to be replaced in people's homes, and they get a postcard, and they get information and letters, and several outreach that we need to come and change your water meter. And when that doesn't happen, it's very problematic. It can impact the accuracy of your water billing. There's no, there's nothing to make it hard on the homeowner. The water department just comes out, switches out the water meter. Sometimes you might have to go inside, but I really hope that people will pay attention to that. It's not just for an exercise to do it. It's really important that
Absolutely.
that technology
We're
is
hoping
updated.
for a good response from this because it helps bring some level of understanding, because a lot of folks just don't know what kind of pipe is in their basement, or if they see it's kind of gray or patina, they already assume it's a lead pipe, and there's a process to determine, the pipe material.
Okay, excellent.
Will there be a communications outreach around this beyond the notices, like through Facebook, or you just have an information page? I can envision that people are going to think water, chemical elements, that I'm hearing words like I'm panicking. So just making sure like that people get ahead of any fear that.
Yeah, we'll message out as much as we can. The letter will have a QR code that brings you to a survey site.
Yeah.
The survey site is a mass DEP
Yep.
survey site, so it's going to be standardized for the entire state. And it actually walks you through the whole process. So we're using kind of a standard one. It's got photos that demonstrate how to do the inspection, how to scratch the surface of it, check for color and things like that. And again, if it's something that person's not comfortable doing, or they don't know where the water meter is or where the pipe comes in, all they do is call us and we can help either walk through the process or set up an inspection.
Just one question. When we say there's no lead pipes in any of Easton's public water main infrastructure, is it cast iron? Is that what most are old? Because they're old,
No.
How do we know what?
So the water mains in our system are predominantly cast iron, but we do have newer ones that are ductile iron. So those are the water mains themselves that carry the water out around through the system. The individual services are, the majority are copper services that feed most of the businesses and homes here in Easton. Then, you know, there were a period of time that early 1900s, lead was the choice of material. Around the 1930s, there was a lot of health concerns, and that's when lead started to be phased out. But then the galvanized service lines was used and incorporated with both lead and services. So, but the amount of water main projects and meter projects that we've done here in Easton, my predecessors understood corrosion control, and they tried to get ahead of this whole process of leaving lead lines in the system, especially on the town side. But on the homeowner side, that's what we're at, Jamie, right now. We need to try to get ahead of that and understand how many of these and those are left in the system.
Great, I'll be one of them, so I'll just say in a 246-year-old home, I'm pretty confident what I'm gonna find between the service line and the entrance to my home will be galvanized, so I'll be filling out the survey.
Don't worry, I'm in the lead years, so I'm with you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So we need a vote on this?
Nope, this is
No,
just
This is
informational.
just information.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So we have you here for a few more things. The next item is a discussion and vote for contract DPW 2023-10, Amendment 1, Environmental Partners Group for the Bay Road tank design.
Sure, I think.
Not to put you on the spot, but I figure while we were talking about Public Works and water employees helping folks out, Dave, you would want to highlight the work that your department's been doing with Health and Community Services.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank, you know, the work of Tracy Levine and Kristen Kennedy, Health and Community Services. They identified a grant program for low-income homes, so a household water assistance program. They identified it, it's could help fund water bills for certain homes that met certain criteria. We said, yes, we'd love to do it. And Alicia Serino from Water Administration did the legwork and was able to identify 37 homes that qualified for the program, did all the paperwork on it, and we were able to get $10,430 paid for on behalf of those low-income properties, so to clear up their water bills.
Wow, that's
Excellent.
amazing.
So it's a great program, and like I said, we thank Kristen and Tracy on that.
Congratulations to both of them. That's amazing.
terrific.
Yeah.
I'm sure people were pretty happy to get that.
Yeah, it's you know,
Information,
it
too.
seems like a good program. Hopefully it'll happen again next year as well, so.
I think I just saw that advertised on TV. I had never heard of it before until I saw your note about that.
Yeah,
That's
a
great.
great program, so.
All right. So, over to the discussion and vote for the DPW contract with Environmental Partners Group for the Bay Road tank design.
Sure, this is just an amendment for design contract. The original contract was $149,550. We had to do some soil testing that we didn't anticipate originally around the tank, and due to delays, we had to push this off a little bit because of the active treatment plant projects we had. We couldn't take this tank offline, so we've delayed it a little bit. So that's increased the cost a little bit. So we have an amendment for $21,700 for Environmental Partners. I recommend we execute that contract amendment.
Okay, any comments, questions?
Oh, I move to support the contract DPW 2023-10, Amendment Number 1 for Environmental Partners Group, Bay Road tank design in the amount of $21,700.
Second.
Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. And the next one is discussion and vote contract DPW 2024-03 Colonial Municipal Group, new Ford F-550 and accessories for the Water Division.
Again, another water-related vehicle purchase. This is a contract with Colonial Municipal Group. They're on the state bid list. It's $150,335.40, and it'll help to replace and keep modernize our fleet with truck 129.
Excellent. Comments, questions? These are all pretty straightforward.
Straightforward, yeah.
All right, Craig?
Vote to approve contract DPW 2024-03 Colonial Municipal Group, new Ford F-550 accessories for the Water Division, the amount of $150,335.40.
Second.
That's Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. Next, discussion and vote for DPW 2024-18 with Phoenix Communications Incorporated, fiber optic cable to the water storage tanks.
Again, another water related item here. Phoenix Communication does our fiber installations. We've done this at the Red Mill Road treatment plants, at the PFAS plants, and this will extend fiber to both our tanks, and it's being paid for out of the appropriation for the Bay Road water storage tank. The cost is $123,190, and Phoenix is on the state bid list.
Excellent. Comments, questions? Okay.
Move to
Craig?
approve contract DPW 2024-18 Phoenix Communication fiber optic cable to water storage tanks in the amount of $123,190.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. Next, contract awards for Southeastern Regional Services Group, otherwise known as SURSAGE, for roadway, sidewalk, drainage, and related services for the Department of Public Works, LaRusso Corp., All States Asphalt, Indus Incorporated, K5 Corporation, Premier Fence, RM Pasella, RJ Gabriel, G. Lopes, Kane's Mechanical, and Gibson Roof.
So these are all part of the SURSAGE services bid. As a member of the SURSAGE highway team, we approve the bids, and then the contract paperwork goes directly to the town administration from SURSAGE. So I don't really have anything more to say than we've reviewed these and agree with these contract awards.
Okay. Comments? No, Craig?
Move to award contracts to Southeastern Regional Services Group Services for roadway, sidewalk, drainage, and related services for the Department of Public Works, LaRusso Corp., All States Asphalt, Indus Inc., K5 Corp., Premier Fence, RM Pasella, RJ Gabriel, G. Lopes, Kane's Mechanical, and Gibson Roofs.
Second.
Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Thanks for being here tonight and sharing that good news with us for our people that were getting a surprise discount on their water bills.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
you.
Thanks, Rich.
Yeah.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right, next we have a vote for authorization of Community Preservation Act, grant agreement CPA-ATM 23-01. And it's between the town of Easton and the Ames Free Library for the library roof restoration. Well, hello, Wayne.
Welcome, Wayne.
Hi,
Good to
Wayne.
see you all again.
Thank
Wayne
you for
Beitler,
being here.
Community Planner. This group may remember a month or so ago, we came before you with the first grant agreement for a CPA project. And as a brief overview, the Community Preservation Committee is implementing these grant agreements, especially for large dollar value projects with entities that are not within the town umbrella of government. So this will be the second one that's proposed. It's for $485,658. It's for the Ames Free Library, and it's going to be a roof restoration for the main building. It was last significantly worked on about 50 years ago. It has significant leaks. If folks have been in the library, they'll see a lot of the staining and damage. This will replace the roof with new gutters and flashing and underlayment, and with a red diamond pattern slate, so it will look a little bit different from the roof that people are used to seeing. This is actually an historically appropriate roof. It matches the original roof that was there in the 1880s, before that was replaced with the tile that people are a little more familiar with. So it will still be congruent with what people are expecting. They're using the same firm, I believe, that did the Queesit House project quite recently. So they're hoping to get started this spring and summer to get the work done before the weather turns again this coming winter. That's why this was an emergency request at the fall town meeting. People may remember this came up so they could get a jump on it. And the library is actually matching half the cost. It's an over $900,000 project all told.
Wow, that's great. I like the grant agreement in the packet. That was very helpful. All right, any comments or questions? All right, Craig?
Move to authorize Community Preservation Act grant agreement CPA ATM 23-01, Town of Easton and the Amesbury Library roof restoration in the amount of $485,658.
Second.
That's Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. And the next one is discussion and vote for contract PCD 2023-07, Amendment 1 for SWCA Incorporated, Historical Resources Survey and Inventory.
Thank you. So this was a CPA-funded project from several years ago. There was a very difficult time trying to find a contractor to do the work. We finally managed to find a qualified contractor. Contracted with them, they began the project. They had some staffing challenges and were somewhat delayed in their deliverables. We had a very constructive meeting. Some historical commission members, Tim Hurley and historian Ed Hands, who's on the commission, and he is working closely with the SWCA consultants, reviewing, editing, and confirming their materials. And they need some more time to actually complete the project. We, as I said, had a very good conversation, and we're proposing to move the deadline out to mid-May, May 10th. By about 2 months or so to give them the time to actually complete the inventory forms.
So is this the inventory that goes into the MACRIS database?
It is, exactly, yes. So the Massachusetts Historical Commission maintains a database of historic property or potentially historic property inventory forms, and it's important for the Historical Commission as a resource when they consider, say, demolition review applications. First cut in the Historical Commission's deliberations are, is it an historically significant property? Just because it's old doesn't mean it's significant. So having good objective documentation about older structures in Easton helps with a very objective approach to managing, maintaining, and protecting Easton's historic resources.
It's super interesting. So my house is listed on there, and my house was one of the original properties that the Ames Shovel Works owned, that the workers lived in. So I was able to go back using that information and trace, I have the original deed from the Shovel Works to the first owner. And it was originally a two-family house, which I can't even believe you could barely fit one family in it, where they put it. But reading the history of who had it and how it changed hands and the significance of it is really, really interesting. And then you're going to want to look up your neighbor's houses
Oh,
too
yeah.
to see
It
it. So.
is fascinating stuff. And some of those houses, then there were actually 4 families.
Yeah.
Which is pretty entertaining. And something that the commission does do with each of these surveys, one of the deliverables is just hard copies for the commission to then mail to the property owners.
Yeah.
Because people are really interested to learn about their houses.
And just while I'm thinking of it, we were able to buy a little sign for the front of the house. I think it was like $30 or something to the Historical Commission, not Historical
Society,
Commission,
yeah.
Society.
Yeah.
So if anybody has a house and they want that talks about who the name of the house was and the year it was built, it's a really cool thing to have. So, and it helps the Historic Society, right?
Yeah, yeah, and reach out to me or the Historical Society in the old train station, and they will set you right up.
Excellent. Anybody have any comments or questions about the survey? All right, Craig?
I move to approve the extension of contract PCD 2023-07, Amendment Number 1, SWCA Inc., Historical Resources Survey and Inventory to May 10th, 2024.
Second.
That's Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. Excellent.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you
Wayne.
very much.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, Wayne.
All right, we're getting close to the end here. Item 14, the town administrator presentation for fiscal year 2025 preliminary operating budget.
Just be a second, this will go away. Sorry, while the smart TV. There we go. It's too smart. Thank you, Dottie, and thank you to the board for your time to present the first cut of our budget for fiscal 25. So the upcoming fiscal year for Easton is going to be a challenge. Despite successful efforts by the town and the schools to conservatively manage our operating budgets during and after the pandemic, the cumulative impact of years of inflation on expenses and fixed costs, coupled with pretty dreary outlook on state revenue forecast, are painting a difficult picture for this coming July. Unlike inflation rates or numerous years of headline grabbing and blockbusters, state revenue growth, Easton's primary revenue, which is our property tax, has and will continue to be constrained by a 2.5% plus new growth factor every year. Our second largest revenue category, which is state aid, has been funded at statutory minimum rates for nearly all of the past 15 years. The governor's proposed budget for fiscal 25 forecasts only $30 per pupil of new Chapter 70 education funding to Easton. And what that means is an increase of state education funding to our public schools of about 0.25% of what the Easton Public School budget is. Yet that same state budget is proposing a 12% increase in necessary charges that the town owes state and county agencies. The result is a net increase in state aid of about $100,000, which is 1/1000th of our operating budget. Easton's local receipts have been a bright spot for many years now, but they're at this preliminary stage forecasted a 1% increase. Our local reserve positions are strong comparatively, but the forthcoming expiration of the American Rescue Plan Act and other federal pandemic-era programs, coupled with rather extraordinary fixed cost increases and the inadequate state aid growth I just touched on, are very likely going to result in us needing to revisit additional local reserve use for fiscal 25. So against that backdrop, a preliminary forecast is looking at a marginal general fund revenue growth over the current fiscal year of about 2.7 million, which is shy of 3%, for a total general fund preliminary revenue forecast of $97,242,354. This figure falls quite a bit short of preliminary expenditure estimates, which are driven by extraordinary fixed cost increases and cumulative inflation impacts of nearly $100,531,000, and gives you a preliminary budget deficit of $3,289,000. So each fiscal year, there's hopefully somebody doesn't just decide to get interested in municipal finance tonight and watch this, because it's going to sound pretty dreary, but we have a deficit at this point every year. I also don't want to mislead, but this is a large one. Every year has its own kind of unique handful of budgetary challenges. In one year, it could be health insurance rate increases. The next year, it could be a spike in energy costs. The next, perhaps, you have the winter of Snowmageddon, where you have hundreds of thousands of snow and ice removal costs that go into a deficit, or some type of unexpected jolt to a mandatory contractual service like student transportation. What's unusual and unique about fiscal 25 so far is it's not the presence of any one of those challenges, it's that all of them are happening at once in one year. Specifically in the areas, I normally do the budget talking about revenue first and then get it to expenses, but the fixed costs are such challenges here. I'd like to start here. This is not all of our fixed cost categories. When I say fixed costs, for anyone who's watching at home, fixed cost is a budgetary cost that a municipal government has to incur that we have limited to no immediate control over. So operating costs, where perhaps you have staff and you can negotiate contracts and things of that nature that have an impact year over year. When it comes to things like insurances that are collectively bargained, those are pretty much baked in, and whatever those insurance commissions set those rates at, you're going to have to fund, and you have to pay those fixed costs in many cases before you fund any operating needs. So Easton has, for many years, enjoyed below market rate health insurance increases. Many of my 7 or 8 budgets have highlighted that fact over the past many years, being in the state's GIC. In January, I sent a memo out to the Finance Committee, School Committee, and the Select Board that identified that on average we had seen the health insurance budget grow in some years as low as 1.5%, which is pretty great. This doesn't look like it's going to be our year. Preliminary GIC rates for fiscal 25 are forecasted at an aggregate increase of 9.6%, which I think is the worst we've ever seen. We don't have the actual plan-by-plan rates, so the GSE has many insurance plans, and some of those rates may go up. The 9.6 is an average, so it's Easton's actual budget for health insurance next year is going to swing a lot dependent on what the plan-by-plan rates are, and those are being voted on, I believe, this week. Yes, and so once we get that, we'll refine those numbers. But this is a relatively extraordinary increase. And so what I wanted to make sure that I said is, in too small font here, and this is my own fault, as we walk through these fixed cost categories, I'd like the board and anyone who's watching at home to keep in mind, we're projecting revenue growth of 2.93%. So keep that figure in mind as we start walking through. So for healthcare, we're looking at 9.6%. That's almost $1 million increase right out of the gate. So we're forecasting a total general fund revenue increase of 2.7 million. That's for every single need the town, the school, all of our fixed costs have. And if healthcare holds at what the GIC has forecasted as an aggregated rate, that takes out a third of your spending capacity, so to speak, your investment capacity right out of the gate. Bristol County pension assessment, this is actually lower than typical. It's still obviously well in excess of our revenue growth, but this reflects an early pay discount of $100,000. Workers' comp, property, casualty, liability insurance are forecast in the 6 to 7% range. State and county assessments, I touched on this before. State and county assessments include things like charter school and school choice tuition assessments. And so this year, the state budget is proposing 1.9% increase of revenue to Massachusetts, but a 11.88% increase in the money we have to pay out for these services. The major driver of this increase is charter school and school choice tuition assessments. Those make up $141,000 of this $159,000 increase. And so again, we have 2.93% revenue increase. This charge is going up 11.88%. Regional school assessments. We had a very fortunate year last year where, due to some enrollment declines, this fixed cost was basically level funded. Enrollment has normalized at a regional school again. That, coupled with the fact that the regional schools do qualify for Student Opportunity Act increases to net school spending, unlike Easton Public Schools, give you an increase of 22.6%. Again, that's primarily driven by enrollment, but that is a $311,000 fixed cost increase.
I think that's pretty significant to kind of flag that, because I hear people talking, about the Student Opportunity Act, and even different legislators talking about how much money their communities
Yes.
are getting with that. And Easton does not get that. We're not eligible
don't.
because we're a minimum aid community. So if I'm watching the news, I'm thinking, what are they talking about? Why are they not getting more
all
money?
the money.
Right.
All the money. I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'd love to talk a bit more about that when we get to revenue, because that's a very important point. Snow and ice deficit. So I'm not even going to make a joke given the size of the deficit, but this is forecast. We don't actually have a deficit right now. So the weather will have a huge impact here. So in total, inclusive of other smaller increases that weren't itemized on that slide, the fixed cost budget for next year is projected to increase by just over 1.9 million over the current fiscal year. It's a 7% increase. This projected increase would eliminate the supermajority of our forecasted general fund revenue growth. So you see here on this slide, we're forecasting 2.77 million of new general fund revenue. Fixed costs are forecasted to increase by nearly 2 million. If nothing changes, which again, trying not to scaremonger here, things will change. We will iterate on this and we will balance the budget. We have to balance the budget. It's a matter of how we get there. But where we stand now, that leaves 828,000 for any increases to the current town and school operations, which are 66 million. So it's 1.2%. So even before years of inflation that accumulated well into the double digits, a 1.2% capacity for funding increases would be significantly inadequate against the current backdrop. It's going to be a difficult challenge for sure. Looking at other expenditures, so operating budgets for the town and school departments are preliminarily carried at 6.5% and 6%. Respectively for town and schools. For only level services, they're largely driven by contractual or other fixed cost increases in transportation, fuel, and utilities. So we have a large $20+ million fixed cost budget for a lot of these larger items, but there are costs within each of the operating budget that we don't have immediate control over, such as fuel, utilities, service contracts for things like transportation that we have to fund either legally in the case with a lot of school services, or just kind of logically must fund in order for the public service to still function. These increases total 1.3 million, or just shy of 1.3 million for town departments, and 2.8 million for schools, for a total of 4.1 million. So again, we're forecasting revenue to grow shy of 3 million. Preliminary operating requests are requesting over 4 million. Fixed costs are coming in at nearly 2. These departmental operating asks would be over 6%. It's substantially greater than the 828,000 of new revenue available for appropriation that we noted above. And I think it's also really worth spending some time here, going back to the presentation a few weeks ago. Town departmental increases are not being driven above what we've seen for average by additional staff. There's actually no new general fund positions proposed in fiscal 25 for the town government, but instead by increasing assessments to other essential services that we have to fund, such as SEMREC. So SEMREC was our regional dispatch initiative. Part of that program was a 5-year state grant to reduce operating costs as people regionalize and incentivize people to do so. And we are starting to get to the sunset provisions there. It's worth noting that even as that area increases by nearly 150,000, it is still less than half as much money as we used to spend for local dispatch 9 years ago. So it's still a great cost saving for a substantially improved service, but nonetheless, that's a 6-figure budget increase. Similarly, you will notice on the summary here that you'll see information technology budget substantially increasing on a percentage basis, but if we're being frank, that's just reflective of the fact that that budget has been not where it should be for a $100 million organization for quite some time. These are necessary cybersecurity improvements, that not only are important for protecting the town's IT infrastructure, but are essential for us to continue to maintain cyber liability insurances, which is another aspect that ties back to your bond rating and ties back to the security of your overall operation. And so,
is that under enterprise?
No, that's in. We'll get to that as well. That is in the town departments. So just the IT services, again, these aren't positions, and SEMREC constitute nearly a quarter of the town's entire town government budget increase. And so I'm not picking on those things; they're essential. I'm just using it more to highlight that, an increase request, which we will have to cut, of 6.5 is not because we're going on a spending spree and hiring an army of staff. These are, effectively bare minimum business functions that we need to make sure that we're continuing to appropriately fund. The Easton Public Schools budget figure is a placeholder, but it's one which reflects a preliminary analysis by the public schools that showed just a level staffing rollover would yield close to a 4.99% increase to their current budget. These numbers are obviously too high to fit within our anticipated or historical revenue growth, and especially given the pressures of the extraordinary fixed costs increases we're seeing, they're going to need to be reduced as the budget iterates through spring. We will have far more detail on departmental budgets on April 24th and 5th when we do our joint hearings with the Select Board and Finance Committee, as is customary. And I think I do want to tie back to our presentation last meeting where we did a community comparison report that is footnoted and referenced in this budget memo that will be available for the public as well. I really hope anyone who follows along with this takes a look at this, because using SEMREC or IT as an example, the challenges we're facing are not the result of spending splurges. They are reflecting years of inflation that we have been able to mostly avoid the cumulative impact of for this amount of time, but can't forever, and the fact that there are certain essential operational costs such as regional assessments, dispatching, cybersecurity related things that we cannot afford to not fund. And Easton has historically, as demonstrated as recently 3 weeks ago, spent substantially less than comparable sized agencies for years and years, and that disparity is growing. So these reflect small movements towards and making some improvements there, and even that we're going to have to cut back on these preliminary requests.
But even with that increase with SEMREC, if we had been going the way we were before,
We would be spending more than double.
it would be more than double.
Correct.
So that's still a savings, just to
Yeah.
kind of put it into context, because
100%.
the question might be, wait a minute, I thought we were gonna save money if we went into the regional.
Well, we're
We
compared to
we
9
still
years
are,
ago.
right, exactly.
Yeah, so we are still saving. We're getting a far improved service for substantially fewer dollars, even with the benefit of years and years of time. So, nonetheless, in the individual budget years, as those grants sunset, it's still a challenge. And even when that grant is fully sunsetted, we would still be paying substantially less than what we did for local PSAP service. So that gets you to a general fund of $100,531,000. It's an increase of 6.41%. Enterprise fund increases are driven primarily by increases to the water enterprise account related to ongoing water capital improvements, PFAS plants, Red Mill Road plants, and I believe the other account that is shifting is solid waste and recycling, reflective of the new higher rates and more members. So getting into our revenue projections, general fund revenue is expected to increase by about 2.77 million, which is shy of 3%, for a total fiscal 25 general fund revenue forecast of $97,242,354. Nearly all of that growth is attributable to the tax levy, which is $72.25 million. That's just reflective of 2.5% plus new growth. Planned reserve and other fund use is mostly level funded. It includes the planned sunsetting of federal pandemic funds from ARPA, with a reduction of about 300,000 in that area. So Dottie, you made a good point about the Student Opportunity Act. State aid. There's been a lot of news in recent months focusing on the state's finances. The state has implemented what are called 9C cuts this fiscal year, which are usually indicative, or not usually, they are indicative that the actual revenue collections of a state is experiencing are not keeping pace with what their revenue forecasts are. I believe the last time there were 9C cuts, not to put you on the spot, Wendy, but it's been many.
When Romney was governor.
It's been some time. That is a real dynamic that we are now going to have to be living with. I still think it's important to reinforce and highlight that during the pandemic, so municipalities have 2.5% plus new growth, period. That's the law. That does not change outside of an override. During the pandemic, Massachusetts in particular experienced really staggering revenue growth by almost 40% in 3 years. Easton will never see 40% revenue growth in 3 years. I don't know if any municipality would or even could. And the state for a long time had a handshake agreement with cities and towns where whatever their revenue was increasing by, they would increase unrestricted general government aid by, lovingly known as UGA, the best acronym in finance. And that arrangement stopped once state revenue growth started being more than a couple of percent per year. Right, so when the state revenue was growing 3.5%, unrestricted aid to cities and towns would grow by that amount, and that was fine. That was understandable. And then state revenue grew by 40%, and UGA grew by 6%. And so myself, the Massachusetts Municipal Association Financial Policy Advisory Committee that I'm on with the state, lobbied as much as we possibly could during those years, fiscal 20, 21, 22, and into 23, pushing that can we, maximize unrestricted aid to the fullest extent possible, understanding, okay, maybe we're not going to do a 20% increase, but can we do more than 2 or 3 or 4? Because once that revenue growth stopped, it's, if the state revenue starts growing at single-digit percentages again, then that's probably back where UGA's heading, and that's where we're now at. So not to be depressing, but basically to say the window of opportunity is closed, right? So the state had this explosive revenue growth. Now they are dimming their forecast. I think right now the consensus revenue forecast is 2% for fiscal 25 over the downgraded current fiscal 24 state revenue forecast. The budget is proposing 3% August, so that is above the consensus revenue forecast, but it's really important to point out that had this one single revenue category kept pace, even just since the pandemic hit, Easton's revenue in this one category would be $1 million higher than it is today. That did not happen, and that's kind of where we're at with unrestricted general government aid. Education funding. So the largest component of state aid to Easton. State aid to Easton is about $14 million out of a $100 million operating budget. State aid used to be more than a quarter of our total revenue. It makes me sound good at math now that our operating budget's a clean 100. I could do percentages really fast. It's now 14%, right? That's the trend that has been going for years, and it's not a good one. And again, it's not indicative of the rest of a budget going up 5, 6, 7, 8%. The rest of a budget's going up 2.5%, 3%. State aid has consistently been under 2%. In some years, net state aid is under 1%, such as the current budget proposal. The largest component of that $14 million account is Chapter 70 education funding. There has been a substantial amount of attention paid to education funding, particularly in the wake of certain strikes around the Commonwealth, where the state has and should receive credit for. The state has, through the Student Opportunity Act, substantially increased the bottom line investment in K-12 education funding around the state. That's a good thing, that's a noble thing, and it's worthwhile, and it will certainly make a positive impact in the lives of thousands of children around the state. However, because of state funding formulas that look at a variety of factors, including socioeconomic data of your community, tax data of your community, where they think your labor pool is compared to the Boston market, many communities are locked out of those increases. So there are some districts getting 7, 8, 9, 10% year-over-year increases, which would be transformative in Easton. But that's only if you're not what's called minimum aid. So Easton, like more than 100 other school districts in Massachusetts, are minimum aid, and that means that the state funding formula, for lack of a more scientific analysis, determines that we do not need the Student Opportunity Act increases, so we receive what's called the hold harmless minimum aid. That has been set at $30 per student for a long time. The past 2 fiscal years, our legislature, the House and Senate specifically, have doubled that to $60, which has helped. So instead of getting a $100,000 increase, we receive $200,000. Those amounts help. The Mass Municipal Association has long lobbied for a minimum of a $100 minimum aid, so we're not encouraged to see that after 2 years of going from 30 to 60, the governor's budget proposal for starting in July is to revert back to 30 per student. And so this is what the net impact of that is. In 2010, 31%, if you take what the Easton Public School budget cost was, 31% of what it cost to operate the public schools in Easton was funded with Chapter 70 education funds. And over time, that has dropped, and this is only current through 23. That number would continue to decline, but it's dropped by a third. It's dropped from 31% into the low 20s. And so necessarily what that means is that you need to offset that state education funding with local funds. And it looks like the blue bar is broken on that graph because of how little it moves, but that's just what minimum aid looks like. 10 million, nearly 10 million in fiscal 10, and a little bit more than 10 million in 13 years later. Or maybe 11 million. This sets up a dynamic for the public that can be very frustrating, where individuals' tax bills go up every year. And if they tune into this, they would say that I'm probably very bad at math. How can there possibly be a deficit or a structural revenue deficit when our taxes go up every year? And it's because the other main source of revenue has been cut in numerous years and stagnated in many other years. Had not kept up with inflation before we had the highest inflation of 40 years, and now the lid on that's just been ripped off. This is another graph that I think is helpful. Forgive me for this small font size. Unrestricted general government aid used to be known as lottery revenue because the state lottery in Massachusetts, which is one of the most financially successful in the United States, statutorily was adopted to assist cities and towns and localities serve the community through direct financial assistance. When the first of 2 historic economic disruptions since our last override occurred in 2008, state lottery aid was cut substantially. And it was renamed shortly thereafter to unrestricted general government aid. And you will see the orange line there represents the actual disbursements, the actual percent change in what used to be known as lottery aid from a baseline of fiscal 20 dropped to nearly 40% below 2008 levels. It took until 2017 to be 20% less than what we received in 2008, and it took until 2024 to recover to 2008 levels, not adjusting for 40% inflation and not reflecting that state tax collections grew by nearly 100% in that same window. This is not entirely to blame the state, but this is to point out that there are substantial impacts outside of our immediate control on the town's structural revenue deficit that reinforce how critically important new growth is for our property tax levy. I noted that some of the multifamily housing in Easton, Avalon, one project contributed nearly $1 million in new tax revenue. That's more from one project than we often get in an entire year from all property in Easton. And hopefully when you look at values like that through the lens of what state what state funding to municipalities has looked like in the past 20 years, it makes it a little more clear why it is that property taxes do increase, and yet it can also be true that we have fewer dollars available after paying for fixed costs, after paying for charges that we owe to the state, after receiving $100,000 of net new revenue for our second largest category for a $100 million operation. Why we're just basically increasingly offsetting lost ground in this area. And so, I think it's going to be an interesting time in this industry, so to speak, for cities and towns as they head into the next round of collective bargaining. There's a lot of attention. I'm not weighing in on an opinion whatsoever on Newton, but a lot of attention being paid, and you have discussions happening about the Student Opportunity Act and all the money. Most of the increased spending has gone to about 1/3 of districts. For the remainder, they're as they have been, which is minimum aid. And so that means that any meaningful, noticeable improvement to services have to come from local revenues, which usually are property taxes, and outside of communities with very large commercial bases are from overrides. So one of the categories, and I should note that both Senator Timilty and Representative Doherty have reached out to myself, Dr. Cabral. We have met, we have reviewed this, and have submitted requests for assistance this coming fiscal year, particularly around these areas. They have both fought for increasing minimum aid in the past, and we hope that they will do so again this year. But just looking at the state's current finances, in a year where there are 9 C cuts, I would love to see an increase there, but I don't know if we should count on it, and that's why we don't count on it in the revenue forecast here. We're keeping it at $30 per pupil unless and until we see different.
Well, everybody's going to their legislators asking for the same thing, so.
Yes, there are a lot of financial strains at the state level right now. Other revenue sources include special revenues, reserve funds, other miscellaneous funding sources. Major contributors to that revenue category include local reserves, like free cash stabilization, as well as ARPA revenue replacement. This is forecast to basically flatline at about 1% year over year. I want to just take a moment, because this is going to be an area we have to spend more focus on, in my opinion, in the next few months, and we've had to. For many, many years now, Easton's taken great care to build its reserve position, in part knowing that there are economic shocks along the way. That's what these funds are for. But to build our reserve position through the stabilization fund, through this board, the town adopted and has since, through this board and voters at town meeting, the school committee, which we appreciate, strictly adhered to our fund balance policies. We've increased our stabilization balance from about 1.8 million when those policies were adopted to 6.7 million over time. The coming fiscal year 25, as I touched on, is the last year that we can rely on ARPA revenue replacement. So that's being reduced by $320,000 from a prior year. The town's budget subcommittee has discussed for some time now impact of a forthcoming expiration of those grants. So when I said earlier, this year is unique in that it's all the challenges everywhere all at once. So it's not just the fixed costs, it's not just the state aid, it's not just the state assessments, the cumulative impact of inflation, it's also the expiration of federal revenue sources as well. Budget subcommittees have been looking at that and has agreed about a staggered multi-year off-ramp approach where we carefully rely on some stabilization funds would likely be necessary. At this stage of the budget, we're not forecasting any additional reserve fund use in the budget above last year's levels. Given the size of a preliminary deficit that we've been talking about, we're certainly going to revisit that as we move forward. To tie back to the bond rating, we've made a ton of progress here, but we're still not where the median AA community ought to be. And so it's really important that as we continue to invest through capital improvements, whether approved by voters at town meeting or the ballot box, that we balance our long-term credit worthiness with immediate needs to deal with economic challenges today. So this is where you get for a summary. Preliminary fiscal 25 deficit of nearly 3.3 million is the most substantial we've had in years. Items outside of our immediate control, like state aid, insurance increases, state assessments, other mandatory costs are going to impact the swing of where this deficit moves in the next 4 to 8 weeks pretty substantially as they're finalized, and we will have a much better picture at that time. Between now and then, as I've said, we've already met with our legislators. We will continue to do so to lobby for improvements to state aid. We will be taking a look at local receipts, refining our revenue forecasts. We will monitor those assessments and fixed costs. We will meet with folks. Those are often, there's very little that can be done, but given the size of them, we are meeting with every single group to make sure that there's kind of no stone left unturned for anywhere where we can make savings. After the GIC votes our plan-by-plan rates, we will be calculating actual health insurance budget impacts based on current employee enrollments. We'll roll out some savings plans. We've been able to usually reduce the health insurance budget by meaningful six-figure numbers, which Linda and Wendy deserve a lot of credit for doing a lot of the work to administer, where we offer incentive plans where if folks voluntarily move from one of the costlier programs into a more cost-effective one, we do a savings share for a bonus for the personnel that still gives us a net cost reduction. So we'll definitely be investing heavily in those this year to try and control healthcare costs. We will need to reduce overall departmental budget requests from town and schools. The current estimates and placeholders are far in excess of our capacity to fund. We'll be taking a look at solar and other areas as well to see if there are any credits or other things that we can allocate out against existing accounts for savings. And then finally, as I noted earlier, it's worth repeating the preliminary budget before you tonight includes fewer free cash dollars than our financial policies target, and it currently uses no stabilization funds. We will need to revisit that, but to do so very cautiously because any substantial increase in local reserves used to meet today's challenges are really just widening that revenue deficit tomorrow. So happy to take any questions.
I think that was pretty comprehensive.
Once again, a sobering presentation, but I think that we've taken a lot of steps to make sure that number isn't even bigger than it could have been, and I'm grateful for that. We definitely have a hard road ahead, but like I said 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we'll get there. It's just, it's always nerve-wracking to see it, but seeing that bigger number than usual was especially alarming, so. But thank you, this was very thorough as always, and clear.
It's going to be an information campaign too, right? Because we are coming on the heels of a debt exclusion where a lot of people don't understand the difference between, right. and not just, look, I've learned only in the last probably 10 years, so it's to understand what an operating budget is compared to a debt exclusion and what a structural deficit is, because I think that people are just confounded, right? You're like, well, wait a minute, we just agreed to a $150 million project. How can you tell me there's a structural deficit? And this is sobering, as Jen said. and I know how challenging of an environment we're in for the school department as well as the town. So you've got some tough conversations ahead for everybody, and it's times a year. It's everyone's doing their taxes right now, and now we have this as well. I feel like every year I get to about this point, and it's like a lot to get through in these next couple of months. So thank you.
I do appreciate you bringing up the debt exclusion, because that, obviously, we've talked about substantially with Moody's as well, that although it may not seem to immediately make sense, debt excluded projects have no net impact or pressure on your operating position, right? So that's really important. None of that deficit is attributable to Blanchard School or the recently approved police, fire, public works, and arguably those things take pressure off the operating positions, right? Because you're no longer throwing good money after bad to do costly repairs in aging facilities. But those are exempt costs that once those notes are sold and you have principal and interest, there's an increase to your tax bill that pays just that. That's totally separate from the operating position. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because it does. I mean, if you don't watch municipal meetings for fun, which probably is a good sign for your life, that could seem to make no sense. If we just voted to support police, fire, public works, why are those departments not able to have their needs met? It's a different revenue source, and so that'll be important to make sure that we continue to kind of reaffirm. Those things are not causally related.
And continue to explain just what you said, the positioning ourselves for the future.
That's right.
To run into less structural deficits by not trying to maintain buildings built in the 1950s that are well beyond programmatic needs.
And they make the community more appealing to
Correct.
figure out this housing situation. Tax benefit comes from, so it all comes full circle.
Yes, right, and that's an important aspect of it too, right?
Yeah.
When we were doing that project, there was a lot of really good community engagement, and there was a resident at a meeting that said this is an expensive project, and it's very challenging that we're being asked to consider this when the cost of living is going up in all these other areas, and that's true, and it's we have dual or triple or more imperatives where part of maintaining a strong community that has been able to go as many years without an operating override is taking care of our assets, investing in CPA type projects for affordable housing, historic preservation, open space acquisition. Then on the flip side, a lot of those, as those drive up demand and make folks say, wow, the community is really taking care of itself and investing in itself, I would like to live there, that just increases the demand for a very short supply of housing.
Craig?
Well, one of my concerns is that, as you pointed out, that we've talked to our legislators more than once, but with 9C cuts already happening, and with revenue projections below what the state had anticipated, it's going to be very challenging for us to convince people that we are worthy of increases from the legislature. That doesn't mean we don't try, but it clearly is going to make it very, very difficult for us. And I want to thank our legislators for their willingness to support us and work on our behalf, but they're somewhat constrained as well.
I think that's a really good point. We do have a good relationship with our legislators. We need to give them feedback on areas we want them to focus on. There was just some legislation that would have allowed communities the flexibility to increase local taxes, like for meals tax or hotels tax. We don't have a hotel, but for meals tax, even 1 point on that would make a big difference, and that legislation did not pass. So we need to continue to advocate for things like that. Connor and I are both on committees with the Mass Municipal Association, so we can put our 2 cents in on those types of things and make sure the MMA is also advocating for things like that. And also, you know, this board voted to change the tax shift, which, you know, is trying to also, you know, cushion some of the blow, or at least shift it out a little bit more in a more palatable way between the business and the homeownership community, and doing that in anticipation that this was gonna be another tough year. So I think we, you know, we're really lucky that we have Connor and the team to be able to look at these things and anticipate what's gonna happen and give us options and weigh out some of these and look at the impact. There's other things we can do. We can change certain other rate structures, you know, but everything you do has a consequence over here. So we get very good advice from everyone, and we're just gonna have to just be patient as we go through this process.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Connor. All right, next we have the acceptance of the minutes of February 5th.
So moved, Barger.
Second, Stacy.
That's Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous. Next, town administrator notes.
I have none, thank you.
Any select board notes?
I have none.
I just want to let people know that on March 16th, just remind everyone, at Oaks Ames Hall at 8 p.m., Jack Colombo and friends will be playing with Bobby Venuto, Darren McCarran, Paul Sylvia, the fabulous Brocktones, and a fiddler, Jess Stockinger. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Irish themed, and Shoveltown Brewery will be there with their drinks, and they'll have appetizers available. So it's a $30 ticket. It's a really fun night, and we had these groups at the summer concert series. They're awesome. They all play together, and they have their own bands, and so it's really it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun watching them and dancing. So hope people will come on March 16th. So with that, if I could get a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Barger.
Second, Stacy.
Bodger and Stacy, all in favor? Unanimous? All right, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and thank you again to ECAP for being here to film for us.